Check out FlipsideGaming.com for all your gaming needs. Use the promo code HEROES to save 10% on all orders over $10 and support the channel at the same time. Hey there, it's John from Heroes and Legends, and welcome to another edition of the Magic the Gathering Market Watch. This is our first regular edition of the Market Watch since the big unbannings occurred with Jace the Mind Sculptor and, of course, Bloodbraid Elf. So, as you can imagine, there's a lot to talk about today. Quickly before we get started, though, just a really fast reminder, if you're looking for a way to support us, you'll find those ways in the description below, including Patreon. You'll also find a link to Flipside Gaming. You can get a discount there with a promo code that's offered that you saw at the beginning of the video. They have a good deal right now, actually, on Masters 25 if you're looking for that after you get the 10% off. And then finally, you'll find some product links for Amazon. If you make any purchases on Amazon, once you go through that first link, no matter what it is, we'll get a small percentage. Those are all ways to help us out. It's always appreciated. With that being said, let's get into it because we got a lot to go over. We'll begin with Standard. Top 5 cards that lost value this week. Number 5 is Vraska Relic Seeker, down 37 cents to $11.22. Vraska is still a good card. She's been going down a little bit, but her descent is slowing down now. She's seeing some play like out of the sideboards, usually of like Constrictor decks or some of the mid-range decks right now in the format. Maybe a 1 of or 2 of out of the sideboard typically in those decks, but still, I do think this goes down a little bit more, but it will stabilize maybe around the $9-10 mark. Number 4, Angel of Invention, down 47 cents to $6.47, so this continues to drop. And you know something though, gift decks are still kicking around the format. They're not one of the big dominant decks that you think of right away, but they still can show up, sometimes put up a good result, especially in smaller tournaments. You see these kicking around Friday Night Magic still quite a bit. So if you're a fan of the deck, I think it's actually a pretty interesting build still. Then a lot of the cards are a little bit cheaper right now. Number 3, Awatli Radiant Champion, down 48 cents to $6. Well, Awatli continues to lose value pretty quickly, but I will say this, I mentioned this last week, but she is seeing a little bit of standard play in like a cat aggro deck, and it's usually a 2 of in that deck. And beyond that, this is still a very interesting card for Selesnya tokens and Commander. I do think if it wasn't for Commander, this card would already be probably around the $5 mark, maybe even less. So it's a card that does have a role. It's just not in a lot of places right now. Number 2, Blood Sun, down 73 cents to $4.13. So this will continue to fall. It's not seeing a lot of play. The week it came out, I did see it in a mono red sneak deck in Legacy, and it actually looked kind of cool there. Beyond that, you're not really seeing it do anything significant in Standard or Modern right now. So we'll have to kind of wait and see. This is one of those cards that people will stumble upon uses for as time goes on and maybe as more cards get printed. So it's slow right now, and let it drop a little more. If you're planning on picking up playsets, I think this card gets down to maybe the $2-3 mark real soon. If that's the case, maybe grab a few copies for the future, and that way you have a playset if you need them someday. Number 1, Kumina Tyrant of Araska, down $1.17 to $18.99. Another big fall for this card this week. And yes, this is a 4 of in standard Merfolk decks typically. However, the problem is you're not going to play this outside of Merfolk decks, number 1. Number 2, the Merfolk decks are starting to fall off a little bit. They haven't been able to put up that big result in a big tournament. So a lot of times you see them coming in maybe 9th place or in the teens or something like that, or doing well in a smaller tournament. But they're starting to get overshadowed now by some of the more popular decks in the format. And because it doesn't have like that one big win, people are starting to move on. So this card is going to drop, and I think it's going to drop significantly over the next few weeks if something doesn't change. Now, the reason this card isn't lower right now is the fact that it's really awesome in Commander. There's a lot of Commander players wanting to pick this up as their Commander in a Merfolk build. And because of that, the price is falling a little slower than maybe it normally would have. All right, let's move on to the top 5 standard cards that have gained value this week. Number 5, Field of Ruin, up $2.28 to $4.50. Now, this is a card that is good in standard control decks, but it's also good in modern control decks. We saw that at the Pro Tour not too long ago. So even though this is an uncommon from Ixalan, a set that has really flooded the market, this is still going up significantly this week, which really speaks to the amount of play that it's seeing. This card is the real deal. Number 4, Hazaret the Fervent, up $2.65 to $21.87. Now, this is a card that also crosses over into Modern, although its role in Modern is a little smaller. Sometimes Mardu Pyromancer, although Jerry Thompson's build wasn't running it, but a lot of times you'll see like one of these in those decks. Sometimes in like Mono Red Prison decks as a 1-0, stuff like that. But Standard is where this card has really, really shined. And I mentioned last week that I would expect this to hit the $20 mark this week, and it did, and then some. This is in a lot of relevant decks right now. The mono red aggro deck, the Boros aggro, the Rakdos aggro. It's in the vehicles deck. It's just in a number of strong decks running red at this time, and the list actually goes on beyond that. So this is a card that's seeing tons of play. Again, it's going to be super relevant throughout this meta and probably into the next. I do think it will start to settle down soon. It will climb a little more before it stabilizes, though. Number 3, Vraska's Contempt, up 273 to 1490. So finally, this is at number 1. It's been number 1 for a number of weeks now on our list, but it's still going up significantly in value. I do think it will start to stabilize pretty soon, though, as people finally do get their copies and get their playsets together. The funny thing about this card was fantastic in the last meta. It's amazing in this meta because there's more decks just running black and more players that just need copies. In the last meta, a lot of people were just kind of leaning on Teamer Energy and playing that all the time, so they didn't need to pick up this card last time around. This time, those folks that are now moving on to different decks, they need their copies, and because of that, this has been super healthy. This is just simply a staple of the format. There's no other way to say it. Pretty much if the deck is running black, whether it's your Constrictor decks, your mid-range decks, whatever deck you choose with black in it, it's going to do some work for you. Number 2, kind of the red equivalent of the previous card, Rekindling Phoenix at 403 to 2716. If you're playing Standard, you're playing red, you're probably playing this card. This is all over the place. All the various aggro decks running red. You find this in mid-range builds, you'll find this in vehicles, you'll find this basically anywhere you can fit it in. So the card is just incredible, and it goes up a lot this week. It's going to go up more. I think it will cross the $30 threshold pretty soon before it stabilizes. And number 1, a Johnny Valiant Protector, up 871 to 1297. What is the story behind this? Well, first off, this is a Planeswalker deck, Planeswalker. You won't find this in regular packs. The reason it's going up in price, twofold. The main reason is the fact that MTG Goldfish, Saffron Olive, featured a Time Stream Navigator deck with 3 of these in the main. And Saffron Olive puts together some really cool decks. He does some really awesome builds, sometimes different budget builds and such, that every once in a while, one of them grabs a lot of people's attention, kind of captures the imagination. And even if it's casually, a lot of folks will decide they want to put together the deck, maybe play Friday Night Magic or something like that. This is what's happening with this card. I don't really think the deck's going to put up huge tournament results in major tournaments, but I do think it's a super fun deck that a lot of people are going to want to put together. So they're scrambling for these Johnnies. Problem now is the second issue with this card is simply there's not a lot of singles on the marketplace because you're not going to find a lot of mass openings of these Planeswalker decks. Basically, stores will open some of these at the beginning because there'll be some slight demand for them. But once they kind of reach a certain point of value, then it's just cheaper to go ahead and buy the deck and more efficient just buy the deck, which you can usually pick up at Walmart and Target or your LGS, right? But because there's not a lot of copies on the online marketplace as singles, you're going to see a nice little spike here. Doesn't mean the card's hard to find or super rare or anything like that. It just means it's popular enough right now that it's catching up to basically the price of the deck. So there you go. I would expect this to snap back pretty soon and have probably a pretty strong swing in the opposite direction. All right, let's move on to the world of Modern. Like I mentioned at the top of the show, it's crazy right now. We're going to start off with the things that are losing value, though. Number 5, Chalice of the Void. This is the Mirrodin version, down $1.21 to $76.01. I do want to point out the Modern Masters version's ticking up just a little bit this week. It didn't quite make our list that you're going to see in a few moments, but it is going up. So these things are sitting around the $75 to $80 mark, and that's been pretty consistent for them altogether. Good Modern card. You could argue even better in Legacy and Vintage right now, actually. Maybe it gets reprinted in Masters 25. You could hope if you're holding out to pick this one up. Number 4, Living End, down $1.32 to $28.43. So this card has been going up a lot over the last few months because of excitement around the Living End As Foretold deck. It took a long time for that deck to actually put up a true result, though. It just happened a couple weeks ago and actually was a variant version of the deck that a lot of people were running for the last couple months. Unfortunately, then the unbannings happened and everybody's attention moved on to other places. So I think there's a chance the Living End As Foretold deck gets lost in the shuffle a little bit, unfortunately, going forward. Now, Living End, just as a card, is still going to see Modern play. We don't know the quantities it's going to see now that the meta is shifting, but it will stick around. I do think it's at a high price point right now, though, for the amount of play it's going to see going forward, and it will lose some more value. Number 3, Aether Vial, down $1.51 to $33.84. This is the Modern Masters version. This is a card that was reprinted in Iconic Masters at Rare, so there's a lot of copies out there in the marketplace right now from that particular set. But I will say this, even though that one's slightly cheaper, it's not that much cheaper because the card still remains super popular even through the release of Iconic Masters thanks to the excitement around the Humans deck in Modern. Now there's other great decks that run it like Merfolk and such, but it's really Humans that have kept the price point of this card relatively high recently. But now I do think, especially with the meta shifting and attention going to other places right now, that the card will come down a little bit, at least in the short term. Number 2, Phantasmal Image, down $1.52 to $6. This is a card that spiked pretty heavily the weekend of the Pro Tour as people saw its utility in the Humans deck in Modern. Since then, it snapped back a little bit, which is normal considering there's a fair amount of copies out there. Number 1, Kozilek, Butcher of Truth from Rise of the Eldrazi, down $2.28 to $31.34. Don't really think of this one typically as a Modern card, more of a legacy card in like Eldrazi post decks, and it's ticking down a little bit this week. Alright, let's talk about the cards that are gaining value this week. And there's so many, we're actually going to do 10 of them. Now, we did a video on Wednesday, I mentioned earlier, we just focused on Modern. And even since Wednesday, things have gotten stronger. So that's pretty crazy to think because they were pretty insane on Wednesday. So we're going to jump in. As a matter of fact, I'll do you one better than the top 10. We're going to look at 11 cards. Here's an honorable mention. Dark Confidant. This would have been number 11. Modern Masters 2015 up $3.41 to $50.81 with Ravnica City of Guilds up $3.85 to $55.90. I wanted to mention this card because first off, financially, it's growing at a high pace. Secondly, this card was popular before the unbannings of Jace and Bloodbraid, simply because it was awesome in Humans, among other places. But now, aside from just Humans players wanting to pick it up, you also have people thinking, you know what, let's go ahead and get that Jund band back together. And I mentioned this on Wednesday, this card is a part of that band, so gonna keep going up, I think. Alright, number 10 is Cryptic Command. This is the Modern Masters 2015 version in particular, up $3.88 to $30.89. Right now, you can get a little bit of a cheaper version if you want to go with Iconic Masters, but these cards are going to be growing and building some momentum now due to, of course, Jace the Mind Sculptor being in the format. A lot of people are looking at control builds and various types of control builds, and this card is going to fit nicely into pretty much all of them. Number 9, Entreat the Angels. Two versions here. Evison Restored up $4.91 to $8 with Modern Masters 2017 up $5.79 to $8.24. Okay, so if you watched Modern Super League this past weekend, they were running some Modern decks like post the changes. And our friend, again, this is the second time I'll have to mention him in the video, Saffron Olive, MTG Goldfish, again doing some amazing stuff. What an incredible brewer, I'll say. This guy is awesome. He had a team, so I don't know how much of it was him and how much was his team, but he was playing this deck, and it was a Miracles deck, basically. You know, Jace, control cards, and you try to Miracle and treat the Angels as your win condition. Looked really sweet, looked incredible on camera, and it captured a lot of people's attention. So people are trying to convert this now into paper, and they're picking up copies of Entreat. Tarmogoyf is coming in at number 8, and all 4 versions are here. Now, if you saw the video on Wednesday, we talked about this, but Modern Masters 2015 up $3.77 to $71.96. Future Sight up $4.47 to $98.99. Modern Masters 2017 up $4.98 to $69.95. Modern Masters up $6.67 to $78.86. So I guess the lull in Tarmogoyf has finally come to an end. Now, part of it was due to the Pro Tour. I mean, I think a lot of people were reminded when they saw the Abzan deck in the top 8, and they also saw the Traverse Shadow deck in the top 8, that, you know what? Yeah, maybe Goyf isn't as good as it used to be, considering Fatal Push is out there and stuff, but still really good. And now, a lot of people with the changes in the meta coming up are gravitating towards this card. 2 reasons. One of which a lot of people are thinking, you know what, I'm just going to put the Jund deck together again. So again, part of the Jund band getting back together. A lot of players are gravitating back towards this card, or maybe building that deck for the first time. Secondly, though, something I'm seeing a lot on Magic Online already, I'm seeing some of these control decks where they're using Tarmogoyf as a win condition, believe it or not. So basically Jace control decks with some Tarmogoyfs thrown in to actually win the game with. Kind of crazy, but I guess we'll have to wait and see if that converts to paper and how that gets absorbed by the meta. But still, people are trying it out, and that alone is going to bring attention to the card. So this card could be seeing a much higher percentage of play very, very soon. Number 7, Kolaghan's Commands, up $8.37 this week to $22.96. This card had a huge showing at the Pro Tour not too long ago. A lot of people that maybe didn't have this on their radar definitely will have it on their radar after seeing its performance there. Beyond that, it's in Jund colors, so it's going to play well with Bloodbraid probably going forward, so that brings more attention to the card. And it's actually not bad against Jace either, so that's another thing to think about. So overall, this card is going to continue to be super hot. I remember back in the early days of the channel, this is one of the cards I was really pushing as something you should pick up play sets of. I didn't have a lot of subscribers back then, but I hope they listened. Number 6, Snapcaster Mage. 2 copies here. Innistrad up $8.78 to $69. Modern Masters 2017 up $9.14 to $72.09. So very significant gains. You can probably imagine why. Again, it's all about control decks thanks to Jace. So this card just gets a little bit better, perhaps in a future meta. Number 5, Liliana of the Veil. Same 2 sets here. Innistrad going up $7.75 to $99.19 with Modern Masters 2017 going up $9.94 to $99.90. So basically back to $100 for Liliana. Again, key part of the old Jund deck. So even though Liliana was doing pretty good without Bloodbraid in the format, perhaps she gets better again with it in the format. So I do think some people are thinking that. Also, another good card against Jace, maybe even a good card with Jace. I've seen some of that going on in Magic Online. So we'll have to kind of wait and see what her role becomes, but I have no doubt it's going to be more significant than it was in the last few months to a year. Number 4, like this card needed any more help. Celestial Colonnade goes up $10.19 this week to $63.12. Yes, it's a huge part of the control builds, and again, more focus on those because of Jace. No surprises here. But hopefully this gets reprinted soon. This desperately needs a reprint. Maybe Masters 25. I guess we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, the card's incredible in control. Number 3, Blackcleave Cliffs up $13.57 this week to $47. Another card that's been super hot over the last couple weeks, thanks to the Pro Tour initially, because this is part of the mana bases of a lot of decks, actually. Sometimes Dredge is a popular one, but the reason I think a lot of people were gravitating towards this card recently is because of Mardu Pyromancer and Hollow One decks. Now, since then, with Bloodbraid, again, this fits into the Jund colors and such, so this card is going to become even hotter, at least in the short term. So I do think it's going to reach its peak soon, but it's going to go up a little more before it does. Number 2, Disrupting Shoal, up $15.24 to $24.48. Now, as you can imagine, I've already seen this on Magic Online. A lot of folks are trying to play this in control decks with Jace. This is actually an interesting, maybe, sideboard card for mirror matches if you're up against another control deck with Jaces, because if you can get your Jace out and then maybe you don't necessarily want to play a second or third one and just sacrifice the other one to get the extra effect, you could hold on to it to use this to pitch it and counter your opponent's Jace. Will that become a thing? Will it become like Jace Wars? I don't know if it will become that big of a deal. Because I will say this, at least so far on Magic Online, I'm seeing a lot of decks with Jaces, some control decks, some are a little more creative. I'm seeing Bloodbraid show up in Jund as well as other places. But I'm also seeing a lot of decks without those cards. So I don't really know exactly where the meta is going to go yet. I think it's too soon to call. But I do think the variety, maybe it won't be quite as diverse as it was, but I do think there's people still pushing for variety, which is a good thing. So with that being said, does this card really make it into the paper meta? I guess we'll have to wait and see. Perhaps it's fine in control. In the past, it's probably better now that Jace is there, but in the past, it always fell short because of the high variance of this card. Having another card that's the right casting cost was hit or miss many times. So it was no force of will, unfortunately, but maybe it's good enough now with Jace. We'll have to see. Number 1, who else could it be? Jace the Mind Sculptor. Eternal Masters going up $59.90 to $140. World Weight going up $63.06 to $145. And from the Vault 20, even though not a lot of people are crazy about the foiling process there, up $69.92 to $149.44. I think that's mostly due to the lower print run, though. As you can imagine, this card is just exploding right now due to the unbanning. Bloodbraid didn't quite crack our top 11, but we're going to talk about that card a little bit later in notable mentions just to catch you up. But right now, it's all about Jace. And as you can see, this card is probably reaching its peak. It might go up a little more, but here's the thing you want to remember about the card. I think once the rubber meets the road and people sit down and start playing with the card and they kind of see the weaknesses also that are there, because it's not perfect, I think this calms down a little bit. The hype will subside. People will start moving on and reality will sink in a little bit. So you'll see the cards start to decline. And also the other thing is, don't forget, it's about to be reprinted in a few weeks. It's going to be a Masters 25 as a Mythic Rare. So there's going to be a lot more copies entering the marketplace. That's going to take its toll on value too. So this is the peak right now. I don't think it's going to get much better than this. And then the card will start to gradually start to soften up, which is good because this price point's pretty ridiculous right now. Now, if you're curious about foils, I decided to throw this one on here for fun. Eternal Masters foil went up 102.08 this week to 233.24, with the World Wake foil up 236.22 to 574.79. So even though From the Vault is a foil card, technically, it doesn't always, market-wise, kind of fit into that category because it's the only version of the card. Basically, if you buy a From the Vault 20, you know you're getting a foil Jace. And even though that's a limited product, it's still printed in enough quantity that it kind of feels along the lines of a regular Jace printing for the most part, where these are very difficult to find. We're lucky enough to open an Eternal Masters foil on camera that one time. That was pretty crazy. So, yeah, these cards are probably going to go up a little more, but again, I would expect them to stabilize much like the regular ones soon. All right, let's move on to Legacy. Legacy's not as crazy as Modern is right now, but what lost value this week? Number 5, Psionic Entity, down $25.95 to $14. So we talked about this last week, and there's going to be some more cards that fit this profile as we go forward today, but there was a buyout of a number of Legends, and even some cards outside of Legends that aren't even reserve lists, that were just really cheap cards. Someone's going around buying them out and selling them back to the marketplace relatively quickly. This was one of those cards, so it's already going down, and we're going to talk more about that a little bit later. Number 4, Eureka, down $28.46 this week to $270. Not a huge drop for a card with this much value. Number 3 is Taiga from Unlimited, down $44.74 to $197.99 this week. Number 2, The Abyss, down $50.05 to $424.95. This card's been hot recently, so just snapping back now. Number 1, Force Field from Unlimited, down $183.81 to $172.49. I don't really think this is like the end of a buyout or anything like that. I think this card was actually growing at a more healthy rate. It's just that with these unlimited cards, because there's not a lot of copies out there sometimes listed in the marketplaces, that the values can be a little swingy. They go back and forth a little bit, and we'll talk more about that at the end of the video. But this card is a great 93-94 format card, coming down quite a bit this week. All right, let's look at the cards that have gained value this week. Number 5, the Tabernacle, at Pendrell Val, up $60.63 to $1,597.50. So I do want to point out, last week's video, we did not have the Tabernacle or Jazam Djinn on our list. Unfortunately, that streak ends. Number 4, Shapeshifter from Antiquities, up $62.06 to $64.50. Okay, here's another example of this buyout that we've been seeing. This card from Antiquities, it's not on the reserve list. It's been reprinted in 4th and 5th edition. As a matter of fact, you can find cheaper versions of the card. But somebody went out and picked all these up, and they're being listed at higher prices. So expect this to end pretty soon, though. Number 3, Scrubland from Unlimited. And this is up $62.62 this week to $249.11. Number 2, City of Brass from Arabian Nights, up $70.78 to $334.28. A card that is not on the reserve list. It's been reprinted many times if you're looking for a cheaper copy of it. But this is a good 93-94 card, and those players will be grabbing this version. And also, it's a Arabian Nights card. They're getting harder and harder to find in good condition. Number 1, Ali from Cairo, up $124.46 to $300. So maybe this is a buyout, but this could actually be true growth because this card has been severely undervalued for a while. It's another one of those reserve list Arabian Nights cards. It's kind of iconic at this point and getting harder and harder to find. I hope you picked up copies when they were cheap. I remember preaching a few months back when these things were around $50, $60. Hey, you should grab a copy for your collection because at some point they're going to dry up, and I think we're getting to that point now. All right, let's move on to some notable cards of the week. I'm going to start off with some Pauper. And let's begin with Logic Knot. Even though this is a cool Control Pauper card, it's also a very cool Modern Control card now, too. So it's not just being driven by Pauper. Up 69 cents to $2.55. This is the Modern Masters version in particular that's going up more this week. Now, Logic Knots really look good at the Pro Tour in a number of decks, so I don't expect that to change going forward. All right, this one's truly a Pauper card. Curian Ranger, up 75 cents to $5.07. You'll find this in Elf and Stompy decks in the format. Cryptrat, 7th edition version this week, up 86 cents to $1.99. So we saw the Visions version go up last week. This one's starting to catch up with it a little bit. Tangle, up 88 cents to $4.24. So you'll find this in sideboards a lot of times, the various green decks, especially the Elf deck in the format. Now, one thing I do want to point out, this card was never printed at Common in paper. The reason it is legal in Pauper right now, though, is because Pauper originally was a Magic Online format. And when it crossed over into paper, tournament organizers, especially the larger ones, just use those same rules, basically. And this card was a Common in Vintage Masters, which was a Magic Online only set. So because of that, it's a loophole. It's technically legal, although I will warn you, check with your LGS ahead of time, just in case local LGSs may be playing by different rules. But for the most part, the cards that are legal in Magic Online are just legal in paper. Next one is Chromatic Star, the 10th edition version going up 69 cents to $5.15, with the Time Spiral version going up $1.30 to $5.53. This is something you'll find in the Tron builds as well as the Affinity builds in Pauper. Preordains on our list again. 3 copies here. Magic 2011 up 69 cents to $3.99. Commander 2015 up $1.17 to $6.88. And Dual Deck Venser versus Koth up $1.36 to $5.88. I really like the art on that Dual Deck version too. So this card does see Vintage and Legacy play as well. So yeah, I'm sure that's behind some of the price points here. But this is awesome in Pauper in so many decks. Oubliettes, having another pretty good week, up 206 to 44.55, part of the mono black decks that you'll find in the format. And maybe this gets a reprint at some point. I hope it does. It is a common from Arabian Nights, so it's not on the reserve list. It's just really difficult to reprint because the rules are a tad bit confusing, and it really doesn't fit into contemporary color pie. Okay, I mentioned we check in with Bloodbraid Elf. Now, the last few weeks we've been looking at the Friday Night Magic promo version, the Plane Chase and Plane Chase Anthology versions. Those all were super hot when people were speculating the card could be the one unbanned. Well, the unbanning happened, and those cards, they actually got so high that they're snapping back now. So they're all actually going down in value. But the other versions are all going up in value. Eternal Masters going up $1.07 to $7.51. Allura Reborn going up $2.11 to $8.22. Commander 2016 going up $2.92 to $8. Although I would expect these to stabilize relatively quickly because there's just a lot of copies out there. I mean, these cards have been printed a lot of times and also many times at Uncommon. So there's just many to find in the wild. Okay, 3 other cards from that potential buyout I wanted to point out to you. Petra Sphinx being one of them. This is from Legends. You can find copies of this in Chronicles. It's not on the reserve list. Up $35.67 this week to $39.98. Exact same story here. Sentinel up at $36.49 to $40. It's from Legends. It's also available in Chronicles, much cheaper right now. And again, not on the reserve list. And finally, third verse, same as the first, Bronze Horse from Legends, not on the reserve list. You can find this in Chronicles, of $39.92 to $46.95. So I think these were just kind of weak targets out there because they were cheap and somebody just thought they could buy them up, sell them at higher prices. I don't really know if this is going to work out. I guess we'll kind of have to see. I just feel like the demand is so low for these cards, and the fact that if I really wanted them for like a commander deck or something, I could just get the Chronicles version, or in some of the cards cases we saw earlier, the 4th or 5th edition version. So I don't know. I guess we'll kind of see. It just doesn't feel like it's the best move to me. I don't know. All right, let's end this with a word of warning. Stolen Grain. Now, technically, if you looked at this card and you're like MTG Goldfishes or your MTG Stocks or Price, it's going to look like this spiked up 133.57 this week to 255.98. However, that's not actually the case. We saw this with another Portal 3 Kingdoms card a couple weeks ago. What's happening is there's a store, I don't even remember if it's the same store, honestly, but somebody kind of identified maybe that this card is just nowhere to be found in the marketplace. They posted a listing at a very, very high price, and that's pushing the price points on all the Crystal Commerce tracking sites. So unfortunately, this is not a true reflection of card value, and this is a good lesson, though, and something I talk about a lot. If there's not a lot of listings, be really careful when you look at sites like MTG Goldfish or Price or Stocks, right? Now, a lot of people ask me, how do I find my prices? I start out there. I look at MTG Goldfish. It's pretty consistent, actually. I'll check Stocks, I'll check Price, and kind of cross-reference them. Then what I do, though, is I look at the actual marketplace. I'm going to go to TCG Player, see what things are being sold for. I'll go over to Amazon, see what things are being listed at there. I'll look at some of the other big sites like SCG, Channel Fireball. Then I'll look at eBay at the end. And that's a great indicator. If you're ever curious or if something doesn't seem right to you, check out eBay. See what people are listing things on there. And more importantly, look at the sold listings. See what people actually paid for cards. Because that's going to be a true reflection, or at least the closest you can get probably with the tools you have available to you to see what's actually happening in the marketplace. So don't be fooled by stuff like this. Now, I will say this when it comes to this card, though. I did check eBay. There's currently no listings for it, and there are not any recent sold listings either. So I guess technically you could argue, since there's only one person selling this card, it's the only show in town, that's technically maybe right now worth $255. But as soon as somebody else puts a normal listing up, this card will go down. Because technically, they could have put this up for $5,000, and the system would have told us this card is worth $5,000. And we know that's not the case, right? So be careful. If there's not a lot of data points out there, just do your homework and continue to watch these videos. I try to do that for you. So anyway, that's our Market Watch for today. A lot of stuff going on. It's been pretty crazy. These videos have been long because there's been so much to talk about recently, but I would expect things to calm down soon. So stay tuned. We'll see what happens. But until next time, hey, thanks for watching. Please remember to like, subscribe, and have a great day. Hey, thanks for watching. This video is made possible by the generous support of viewers like you on Patreon. Check out the description below for links to our Patreon page as well as our Amazon affiliate store, where a small percentage of all sales will also help support the channel. Finally, if you haven't had a chance yet to subscribe, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any new videos on Heroes and Legends. Talk to you again soon, and have a great day.